Second.
Good evening and welcome to the Greenburgh Central School District Community Meeting. I am Dr. Iverson, the Superintendent of Schools, and I am joined by Lisa Raymond, Assistant Superintendent for Business. We are also joined tonight by three of our board trustee members who have worked alongside the administration and collaborated in this meeting. Trustee David Warner is on the call. We also have Trustee Chris Fallon and Trustee Jamal Thomas. So Lisa Raymond and I have prepared some slides that we would like to present tonight for the purpose of this meeting. We ask that you allow us to get through our presentation, complete it, and hold your questions, if you will, till the very end. You will have an opportunity to put your questions in the chat, and at the very end of this presentation, we will go over every question and allow enough time to address all of your concerns. So we get into the purpose of this meeting. It is to provide the community an overview of the ESSER federal stimulus funding that has been awarded to the Greenburgh Central School District, designed to address the impact of the COVID-19 has had on this district and continues to have on elementary and secondary schools in New York. We also hope to provide for you a description of the American Rescue Plan funding and how these funds can be used, as well as engage you in this input and conversation around how these funds should be spent.
All of the federal sources of money are accounted for in the Education Stabilization Fund. This fund was created to prevent, prepare, and respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. These resources can be used for a wide range of expenditures to address needs from the pandemic and to promote stronger post-pandemic needs. Working with these resources every day, we tend to use the acronym for the various funding sources. Listed here are the 5 sources. The first is ESSER, which stands for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief. ARP, which is the American Rescue Plan. GEAR, which is the Governor's Emergency Education Relief. The CARES Act, which is Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security. And CRSA, which is the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations.
So there were 3 buckets of funding the district received under ESSER. This chart here shows a comparison of those funds and the overlap of these funds over the course of 3 years. Starting in March 2020, the district received ESSER 1 funding, which was called the CARES Act. As you can see from this chart, we have through September 2023 to finish using these funds. Then we see ESSER 2 fund, the CRSA Act. You can see that we received those funds in the middle of the 2020-21 school year, and they're now extended to the 2024 year for us to spend. And then ESSER 3 funds are the ARP funds. These are the funds we're going to specifically talk about tonight.
We thought that we would update the community on all the funding sources that led to the American Rescue Plan. The first funding source created was the CARES Act. These were 2 components, the ESSER funds, which provided grants to states to support school districts, and GEAR funds that provided grants to governors for purposes of providing schools with emergency assistance. Both were designed to ensure the continuity of education for all students during the pandemic. Greenburgh Central School District was awarded $312,747 collectively for these 2 grants. The allocations were based on the Title I Part A funds that we received from the 2019-2020 school year, and we were required to share these funds with non-public schools in our district, specifically Maria Regina, the Leffel School, and Sacred Heart. Collectively, these schools were entitled to $29,280. As previously stated, there is a wide range of expenses that these funds can be used for. They include supplies to sanitize and clean our facility, PPE for our staff and students, childcare for first responders, social emotional support and mental health services, planning for and coordinating during long-term closures, technology, which included hardware, software, and mobile hotspots, professional development for administrators and teachers, and planning summer school learning and after-school programs. These funds have already been spent and were spent mainly on cleaning supplies, PPE, professional development, and technology. The second funding source was CRSA. These monies could be used for the same purposes as the CARES Act funding, and it was also based on our Title I Part A fiscal year 2019-2020. Greenburgh was awarded $903,967 under CRSA ESSER 2, and under CRSA Gear 2, we received no funding. We needed to file the application with the State Education Department by July 1 with a tentative budget on how we would be spending these monies. We put in our application that we would have an ENL teacher and social emotional learning support in all of our schools. We also included ventilation for under construction improvements, and we included air purifiers, fans, and Chromebooks.
So the administration is right now in collaboration with our Board of Trustees beginning to start discussing how we want to use the American Rescue Plan funds. Right now, all the state is requiring of districts to do is to submit our initial thoughts. We are not mandated at this point to flesh out our plan with all the details, but we are to alert the state with ideas around how we're thinking around these funds and what we want to use them for. So this slide here shows you just that thinking. It says to us that we can use some of these funds, ESSER 1, ESSER, and ESSER 2, any pre-awarded costs backdated to March 2020. We can use those funds as well as the new American Rescue Plan funds to, first of all, address the learning loss. We know that is a concern nationally, is a concern in our district, and we are actively thinking and planning on how to use funds to address that. And we're planning to use it through implementation of some evidence-based interventions. We also can use these funds for repairing and improving facilities to reduce the transmission and exposure of environmental health hazards, academic, social, and emotional needs. That is a real need in our state and in the world and for our students as they return to school. We also know we need to provide some training for our staff. So professional development is the bucket of what money we can use this for. Planning for and implementing activities during long-term closures in the event we do have to do that again, and purchasing any additional educational technology that we may need.
Greenburgh Central School District was awarded $2,031,651. One new requirement of the American Rescue Plan is that the grant has to designate a minimum of 20% of the entitlement to learning loss through the implementation of evidence-based interventions such as after-school programs, extended days, summer school, professional development, and social emotional learning. These are to ensure that these interventions respond to academic, social, and emotional needs and address the impact of the pandemic on all of our students. Of the amount for learning loss, 14.286% must go towards summer school. Another 14.286% must be designated for after-school programs. The remaining amount can then be used for extended days, or can be designated towards more summer school, after-school programs, social emotional learning, and professional development. The remaining funds, which would be $1,625,321, can be used for cleaning supplies, additional technology, and school building improvements that reduce the risk of virus transmission and exposure to environment health hazards, such as improving ventilation.
So with the money, the 20% of this money, the $406,000, we are looking to, and as I said earlier, we have begun to engage in discussions around after-school programs in our buildings and additional learning support, not only after school, but also during the day. We know that that support our students need needs to be in both venues, and we're looking to begin to see how we can incorporate some interventions during the day to support our students, as well as some on-site, even after-school tutoring. Social and emotional learning will be a focus next year as we open school with the superintendent conference days. Teachers and staff will be involved in some professional learning around social emotional learning and those strategies that we can employ and implement in classes when students return in the classrooms in the fall. Professional development will be for administrators, teachers, and staff. And construction, the allocation there, as you see, is $1,625,321, and that can be used for, as Lisa Raymond specified, for ventilation purposes in all of our schools.
So in summation, this slide shows you the three funding sources of ESSER money for the CARES Act, the CRSA Act, and the ARP Act, as well as the intended use as prescribed by New York State on the use of these funds.
This ends our formal presentation. We thank you very much for listening. We will now open the floor for questions or comments. Ivy Krause is in the chat room. She will be the person to read the questions from the chat, as well as persons will be able to ask questions openly. Ivy, can you start?
There are no questions in the chat.
Okay.
Give it a few.
How about questions or comments from the board?
Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay. So I have in my mind the idea that primarily we're going to address learning loss, and whatever is left from that, I have phase one ventilation projects, right? That this money is crying out for. So I'm looking and saying, my goodness, ECP and the big kahuna, of course, is RJ Bailey and some of the pieces at Woodlands, and that would fit very nicely. So what I'm looking for mainly are whether or not there are any holes, anything that hasn't already been covered by other funding sources. As I understand it, that we already have enough PPE supplies based on the earlier pieces of funding that you showed us. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So how big do you anticipate the learning loss effort to be? It's about the $400,000. What will that get us?
We are, again, looking at several programs. I don't know how big it will be at this point in terms of a dollar figure. It will cost money. The after-school program, it could be a program we purchase. We still need to pay staff to do that. And we need to have a focus on what that instruction will look like, and whether it'll be literacy and or math. So those are things we're discussing. We hope to be able to look at some of the data around students and their performance and determine that focus based on need there. So all of those are the pieces that we still need to do. So to match dollars with that, I just don't have that specific right now.
Okay, so what standards will you use to determine who needs the extra help?
So we are going to be following the state, following school and state data. We're going to be looking at the Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment data that the district has been using for years. Foundations assessments, that's also an assessment used in the district. The phonemic awareness screener, that's also part of that foundations. And looking, of course, at some of the iReady and New York State language arts and math assessment scores. So it's a bundle of data to look at. And determining from there will help us identify our focus area. We may just focus on literacy. We don't know if we can focus on both. We do know our students are entering at a loss, but we also know as they're entering at a loss, when they come in the fall, they're starting on grade level standards. And so that teaching continues. So to bridge the gap and bring in the loss and work on the loss or the skills they've lost, we're going to have to embed that in what they're doing every day. So we don't want to overwhelm them. We know teachers still must teach daily the lessons and content that's required of that grade level. So we're looking at how to do both, how to embed it, whether it's after school, whether it's in addition to, is it during the day, is it tutoring? All of these are options right now on the table. Of course, very much dependent on staff and the ability to do it. So that's where we are. And once we know, we can equate a figure to that and have a better understanding around that. Professional development in the fall, when we, as I mentioned, for the superintendent conference day, will be focused on social emotional learning on day 2.
Okay.
So there will be a cost associated with that professional development that we can certainly share with the Board of Trustees.
That all makes really good sense to me. One question, I believe you specified a variety of tools for checking reading levels and the New York State tests, and iReady will certainly cover the math side. What happens at the high school level? What are you looking for there? Is it more of a tutoring program, or are you looking at concentrating on the same things?
So that is discussion we're having at the administrative retreat, Trustee Warner, next week. That input I'm waiting to hear from the principal and those persons on the call to give me better direction around that. We don't have very clear assessments that are done at the high school level like we do in the other levels where data is collected. A lot of the assessments done there are teacher-made assessments and a lot of teacher recommendation. And so that is information that I would need to if we can wait on, and I will be able to find out what that looks like.
Great, I'll look forward to that.
Okay, thank you.
And Trustee Warner, in regards to the ventilation, under the CRSA Act, when Dr. Reynolds was here, he and I had to complete that application and get it filed by July 1. I have since received questions on that, which I am answering back to SED so we can get approval. But what I included in there under capital improvements, under ventilation, was the complete ventilation repairs and improvements for ECP, so that that building would completely be done, and we could take that off our building condition survey and we could mark that off as that have been being completed. So then RJB and the high school would be what we would concentrate under the American Rescue Plan.
Very good.
Questions have come in on the chat.
Okay.
What SEL program or PD will teachers be using?
Okay, so that's a very good question. We do know that our SEL program presently is not a systemic program. Last year, there was a lot of professional development provided to parents and on staff to teachers from Dr. Teresa Taylor Williams. And so we're piggybacking on that in the fall, knowing that that's just the beginning. She and I have had conversations around how that looks systemically, so that we don't have it looking differently in different schools and at different grade levels. So if that, it could be identifying systemic program. 2 we've talked about so far is the Yale program on SEL, and there's another one called CASTLE. These programs do come with training and they're all very pricey. So we haven't identified what that will look like. We know we need it. So we're going to begin with professional development for all of our teachers in the fall. She will piggyback on what happened last year. She will extend that. So based on what happened in the district around SEL. And from that, I will be able to determine with my staff where we go from there. Presently, I do have staff looking into these 2 programs. They will come back with me and give me information around what, in terms of what that training entails. But I do know that they're pricey, and it does entail more of a trainer to trainer model where we probably send a group of teachers to that training. They come back and kind of build capacity internally. It's not on-site training here. So there's travel costs as well connected with that. So no decision made on that just yet. We're just looking to make sure we align our SEL to be more systemic than more kind of in silos based on buildings and individual classrooms.
Next question. Where can we find this PowerPoint presentation after this presentation?
Okay,
You will be able to find it on our website.
I will give it to Ivy Krause, who's reading from the chat, and it will be posted, and she will see to it that it gets to the person who posts something on the website.
Next question. Will addressing the ventilation needs at Bailey be part of this plan?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is one of the schools that will be reviewed and put in the American Rescue Plan. Yes.
What evidence is there that learning loss exists?
That's a good question. That's the data review we need to do, because that is the nation has even said in some cases there was not that much loss. We do know kids have had some loss. So we don't have the clear data to determine that. That's what we need to look at first and examine and analyze. And that will determine what that loss is, who needs that loss, and what we do about it. No, we're not assuming every child has experienced some learning loss. A lot of children have experienced more SEL support and need for that. We don't have, so the evidence will come from the data analysis, and that's what we need to begin to examine. And that's a process we will use to look at the data, analyze it, and look at the priorities, the strengths and weaknesses, and hopefully be able to determine a focus area, a high yield strategy in that area that we as systemically can focus on as a district. We do know we won't be able to do everything. It's just no way to do everything and address all of the areas of learning loss while simultaneously having our staff teach current on-time learning standards. So we need to embed, we need to find places where we can fold in and try to get the most bang for our buck by focusing on at least identifying one area that we focus on. So it's a lot of pieces. That's why I'm glad the state has given us time to flesh this out, because there are a lot of things to be thought, to plan, and to think about.
Next question. Do the technology expenditures include software purchases for student academic support, such as tool sets that help you assess and develop essential competencies students need to be successful after high school?
That's a question we will have to research and get back to you. We don't have an answer for you right now. I think you're right on it that the technology should do that, but I'm sitting here, I don't have an answer to that.
Okay, next question. Who is paying for this? Will Greenburgh taxes go up because of this?
No, this is all federal stimulus money that has been awarded to New York State, and this is our portion of those funds.
Next question. How much can we maximally spend on infrastructure?
Well, as stated in, as far as the American Rescue Plan is concerned, it's that $1,625,321, which is the remaining funds after the 20% for the learning loss. So that entire amount can be put up for construction. And then there was, under the CRSA Act, we designated $575,000 to be put towards capital improvements.
Next question. Could funds be used to provide a translator in the school offices for families with questions, but not a confidence with English?
We can check on that. That is not listed. We went over the list of things that we can use this funding for. That would certainly is a need, but that would be a stretch in terms of trying to find where it fits in the areas that we are required or mandated to use the money for. So I don't have a definite yes to that, but we could certainly look into that.
I can say that there is money that it's allowable to have ESL English language learner tutoring one-on-one from the funding. I don't know about parental translation.
Yeah, I don't either.
Do we have a budget for ventilation improvements in the facilities? How close does this funding get us to resolving the ventilation concerns?
Yes, we do have an amount that through our building condition survey of what all of the ventilation would cost us. This would make a dent on that ventilation. It would, as stated under the CRSA funds, we designated the $575,000 that would upgrade all of the ventilation at ECP per the building condition survey. And then the remaining money of the little more than 1.6, we could put it towards one of the other buildings, RJB or the high school. That wouldn't cover everything, but it would be a start.
I can tell you RJ Bailey's $3 million by itself. So it'll put a dent in it. It won't take everything.
Have we considered after-school programs for all students, even those that may not have fallen behind?
Not at this point. The monies that we have through this American Rescue Plan, we will be using it to identify those students who have experienced the most loss.
Can we use funds for college and career readiness technology solutions for students and parents?
No, we cannot, not with these funds.
Will these funds be used for CRT education?
Can you,
Can we
can
get
you
what-
say what CRT is?
College.
Is that college readiness?
Culturally responsive teaching.
It might be, it doesn't say
Culturally
on the
responsive
chat.
teaching.
Oh, okay. So, no, not in general. That is, it can be used for learning loss, but it's not used for new instructional initiatives, and culturally responsive teaching would be would classify as that. So it can be used for professional development, but the professional development must tie to the rescue plan and the areas that they stipulate that we can use the money for. So just overall professional development for teachers and other areas that are not connected to this list, no, we cannot. That would be a stretch of using those dollars, and it would be very difficult to probably justify how. But as I'm speaking, I'm thinking around the how we can possibly do that. But I would have to say right now, no, we can't use it for that.
The person that had put that last question in replied critical race theory is
Okay,
what they were referring to for CRT education.
right, right. Okay, thank you.
There are no further questions in the chat.
Okay. Any further questions from the public who on the call and the board?
Well, David did ask most of my questions. And I know of the tools you use to decide which children will receive the after-school help, most of them do refer to literacy, and iReady, I think, is the only one that specifies math. Are we using other tools or teacher referrals to identify children who might need additional supports in math?
Certainly, teachers are a best source, a great source of knowing where kids are. And they were the ones in the trenches, we know, working with the students when they were totally remote, when they came in through hybrid and then full in person. So that would be something certainly we will lean on teachers, because they will be part of that discussion to help identify through the data, and they know it well. So I'm not saying a formal recommendation from a teacher, but certainly teachers will be engaged in conversations as they sit in data teams looking at the data.
Okay, and what about additional language support for new language learners? Would that be covered during the school day, or would that also become an after-school support? Would it be covered in an additional way after school? I know it's covered during the school day, but would they get additional supports after school is my question.
Not for that, no. This will be strictly around learning loss, bridging the gaps around where kids broke down in learning due to COVID.
Okay. Thank you.
And my only question would be, is one of the things that people say is going to be a challenge with regard to this is that putting programs in place that we won't have funding for after this funding dries up. Is that something that we have considered?
Well, we're hoping what we do, Trustee Thomas, will change the practice of our adults who are implementing these programs. So, because you're right, a one and done won't work. We do have, as showed in the comparison chart, we have to 2024 to have these funds to work on bridging this gap. So the hope is by that time that it won't be necessary anymore. This will be part of our practice we do every day. And whether we have funding or not is not the case, not the matter. That our practices have changed, so these things will continue.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Additional questions have come in. What are the next action steps from here for solidifying these plans?
Very good question. So we will continue to meet with the Board of Trustees. We will start formulating and continue to talk here at the administrative level. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a retreat with the administrators. That's where we're going to, and all the directors, we're going to begin talking there. Once school begins, we will have opportunities to get input from our teachers. So the plans will start as soon as next week, as soon as we start talking to principals. Hopefully once we identify what that plan is and we flesh out the details, there will be a formal document that we have that we can come back and share with the community and the Board of Trustees and even submit then to the state with our specific area and how we plan to address it.
Next question, are there constraints on infrastructure use?
Yes, the infrastructure use has to go in accordance with that one statement that it reduces the risk of virus transmission and exposure to environmental hazard or health hazards. So I don't believe we could say use this money to replace a roof.
Can funds be used to support students that may experience social emotional difficulty in returning to school?
Absolutely. That is one of the areas we can use the funds for.
Although the funds cover a 3-year period, are they for a 1-year period, the plans?
The plan is to change our practices and what we do overall. As I said, so it's a 3-year, yes, period that we have these funds, but the funds are not necessarily geared year by year. It's to come up with a program to change what we do so students get the support they need over time, over 3 years. So it's not we have not divided the money by year. It's what the bucket of money we have, and we're going to plan to use it accordingly.
With many non-English speaking families, how will you communicate the determined programs to help capture participation?
We will try things and translate it in Spanish or the various languages. We will continue to do what the district has done in the past to send home correspondence in multiple languages.
There are no further questions in the chat.
I have one follow-up. You were mentioning earlier that you have been speaking with the Dr. Teresa Taylor Williams, who helped our district last year, and that you're looking at putting in place a systemic SEL solution for our district, and you have named a couple of programs that you might be looking at. I know you said you're going to put forth a formal document. Do you know how soon you'd have that evaluation done, or when we might see that actually in the classrooms with the children? Are we talking maybe the springtime by the time you choose a program and get PD for the teachers? Can you just give us an idea of what the students might see?
My best guess is by next year. Right now, these programs are widely known, widely used, highly favored, and every state, every district is going after them. So to even get a date to get training, we are looking at the spring. So just get on the count for any of these. So right now, no, they won't be in place this year. But we'll look to, and then we'll look to see if we do, we're talking next year.
Okay, so that's how this funding would be used for those programs. Are we as a district looking at any interim measures to help support our students socially and emotionally? Well,
and that's no decision. We'll use the funding for that. We're just looking at those programs now because they are very pricey. And again, we have to think about, it doesn't train everyone. It trains a team of people. And then these people become, for lack of a term, almost certified to come back and do that training on site with us. So you're looking at, we need to identify people who have a comfort level with that, who are able to do that, and then bring that back. And then when they bring that back, we have to have time for them to meet and do that. Right now, we don't have a lot of dates we have no dates. After the two superintendent conference days, there's one more date during the year for professional development formally in the calendar. So our thinking will be around how we do it. Once we get the training during the day, are we talking about paying people after school? I don't think we are. So all of this will imply we may have to look at our calendar by next year to make sure we have more time in the calendar to provide professional development during the day, other than the two conference days, to staff here. It's just not enough time in that. And so that's one piece right now that I know would implement or will impact how much we can do. So to say yes, by the spring they go and come back and do it. Once they get back, the training has to happen to us, and that takes time. So I don't know if even next year, but I know definitely not this year. We will look at that. So what we're going to do now to sustain is last year, from my understanding, a lot of training was done by Dr. Teresa Taylor. She's done a tremendous job meeting with our parents and giving strategies on SEL and how to address it at home and in school. All about teachers, all about classrooms, I'm sorry, and our building principals, I understand, created a plan just for their school on what they were going to do. Those things should continue. They will continue to do those things. And what we'll be doing when we meet in the first 2 conference days, she's going to do an overview presentation. What I have built into that schedule is a lot of time to break out into groups by school to then start thinking around how this is going to look in your building this year. So each school will have an opportunity to come up with an action plan. I'm calling it a next steps planner that they will submit to me, where they will decide on what actions, very specific actions, they're planning to put in place, who's going to do it and when and how they're going to measure it. So that'll be the work on that day in the afternoon when she presents in the morning, the strategies and giving us some ways to begin. They will commit to what that will look like in their buildings to get us through this year while we continue to look at the programs I mentioned and even determine if we're going to use it. But right now, that's how we're sustaining SEL. And of course, sending home a lot of information to our parents, sharing through updates, schools sending home flyers, connecting them to resources. We'll consistently do that. Those are givens. But right now, that's how it is. It's systemic as it can be, but it is by school. And we understand why that needs to happen because our schools are developmental. So some of the strategies will look differently at the lower level as they will in the high school, but each school will have a plan for their building based on what they hear and what they've done in the past and the strategies that Dr. Taylor will go over with them on the second day of the superintendent conference day.
Okay, thank you.
An additional question came in. Can these funds be used to create a social emotional program or a quote unquote room for the secondary schools?
All of those are possibilities. Yes. Again, we have not fleshed out specifically how it will look, but that's certainly something that's a possibility. Social emotional learning is a focus and these funds can be spent for that.
No further questions in the chat.
Well, if there are no further questions, Lisa Raymond and I, we thank you very much for your time and for logging on and joining this community meeting. We're excited about what we can do and what we can bring to the students in Greenburgh Central School District, and we will keep you posted. We want to thank our Board of Trustee members who are on this call and the collaboration that we've experienced with them and helping guide this discussion and being involved in this discussion as we collaborate to do what's best for the students in this county. So we thank you so much again.